In 1943, the sun in southern Texas scorched a stretch of land that seemed to run on forever. Out here stood a place called Crystalcity. The war was being fought across an ocean, but the most striking marker on this ground was not artillery or rifles. It was barbed wire. Tall coils of it enclosed a wide expanse of earth. If you walked closer, the scene inside would unsettle your expectations. Behind the wire, there were no columns of prisoners in uniform. Instead, a mother rocked an infant under a makeshift roof. Children played on an open patch of dirt, tossing homemade bean bags and laughing as the sound cut through the dry air. Women hung laundry. Men bent over assigned garden plots, working the soil. You saw Japanese faces, German families, and Italian couples with children. They wore their own everyday clothes, not matching prison garments. At first glance, it could pass for an odd, multicultural community. Then you noticed the watchtowers, the locked gates, and the fence line drawn without mercy. Whatever it looked like, it was a detention camp. During World War II, the United States built many camps to hold prisoners of war. Crystalcity was different. The people held here were mostly civilians the U.S. government classified as enemy aliens, and most unusually, their wives and children. This was a family internment camp. On the battlefields of Europe and the Pacific, gunfire drew lines between friend and foe. Here, barbed wire tried to fence in a question that refused a simple answer. If what you imprison is an entire family, then who exactly is the enemy? These families were not gathered here by accident. Crystalcity existed because of a tightly constructed system of laws and administrative power. Its managers were not the military, but the Immigration and Naturalization Service under the U.S. Department of Justice. The legal basis came from Title 50, Section 21 of the United States Code, which granted authority to control enemy aliens. In practice, the term meant a foreign national living in the United States whose country of origin was at war with the United States. After Pearl Harbor, many immigrants of Japanese, German, and Italian origin found themselves suddenly caught beneath that legal net. Crystalcity's special character was that it held not only single male enemy aliens, but the families of men judged to require detention. The official explanation was family reunification, so a detained father could be with his family. Imagine what that looked like in an ordinary household. One morning there is a knock. Government officials stand at the door with papers. The father is taken away. Weeks or months later, the mother and children receive notice. Pack your things. They are put on a train or bus and sent not home, but to a camp in Texas they have never heard of. The gate closes behind them. The reunion happens, but only inside barbed wire. A child might ask, "What does enemy alien mean?" A mother may search for words and finally say, "It means your father was born in a place that is now fighting America." In a child's small understanding, that complicated legal term can sound less like a category than a stain. They called it family reunification. But what kind of reunion begins only after you pass through a locked gate? Inside the camp, life unfolded in an order that had been carefully designed. The logic of management was everywhere. For administrative convenience, the camp was broadly divided by ethnicity. Japanese families lived in one area, German and Italian families in other sections. They shared the same fences, but differences in language, customs, and pre-war social networks created distance. Each morning, roll call began. Names were called in English, Japanese, German, and Italian, one after another. Families had to respond. Day after day, it became a ritual that reminded everyone of their supervised status. There was a school. Children were expected to continue their education. The curriculum included English and mathematics, and also American history and the principles of the U.S. Constitution. The irony was difficult to miss. In a place without freedom, students studied the documents of freedom and democracy. In class, a child might be asked, "Where are your parents from?" The answer, Japan, Germany, or Italy, could instantly link that child to the enemy being described in the lesson. Education tried to shape an Americanized future while the environment constantly branded them with an enemy past. Work was part of daily life, too. Adults were assigned to maintain the camp, help in kitchens, and cultivate crops. They could earn small amounts of camp-issued tokens and spend them at a commissary for modest extras, candy, paper, pencils. By imitating a normal economy, the system tried to make confinement look orderly and productive. For children, the playground became a small refuge, languages mixed in unexpected ways. A Japanese child might pick up a few German words from a playmate. An Italian child might join a game in halting Japanese. For them, the world inside the fence was the whole world they knew. In children's play, the boundary between enemy and friend blurred. When a school stands behind the wire and voices rise in reading aloud, what is a nation doing? Guarding children or shaping them? Among the detainees, one group faced circumstances so tangled it was like being trapped in an identity maze with no exit. They were Japanese families brought to the United States from Latin America, Peru, Panama, Mexico, and other countries. Under wartime inter-American agreements, the U.S. government received thousands of Japanese immigrants from those countries, also in the name of national security. Many were taken with no warning, transported by ship across the ocean, and eventually delivered into camps like Crystalcity. Many of them had lived in Latin America for 10 or 20 years or more. They had families, farms, or businesses. Their children might have been born in Lima, with Spanish as their first language and only a distant idea of Japan. Yet in U.S. government files, they were simply classified as Japanese enemy aliens. Picture a representative family. A father runs a small shop in Peru. After war breaks out, the entire family is taken away. They are sent to the United States, then moved again until they arrive in Crystalcity. On camp paperwork, their nationality might be marked as Japanese. Under anticipated disposition, there might be a single word: repatriation. A mother holds that document and feels the room tilt. How is she supposed to explain to a child born in Lima that they will be sent back to a country that is almost a stranger? The child's identity is torn apart. Peru by birth, Japanese by ancestry, now confined in an American detention camp. They carry 3 geographic labels, yet possess no place they can safely call home. Even when daily life was arranged to seem orderly, even when there were moments of warmth, another wall remained. It pressed harder than barbed wire, censorship and control. Communication with the outside world was the camp's only fragile link to the life people had known before. But every letter sent or received had to be screened by camp officials. Sensitive phrases were blacked out. Entire passages could be removed. Sometimes a letter arrived so mutilated it barely communicated anything at all. People learned self-censorship quickly. Letters to friends and relatives shrank to weather and health, avoiding anything that could be interpreted as complaint or as revealing camp conditions. The same restraint shaped letters from outside. Loved ones were careful, fearing that saying too much would cause harm. News and music played over camp loudspeakers, but the content was filtered. Certain reports about the war's progress or domestic politics were withheld. Installing a radio to listen privately to outside broadcasts was strictly forbidden, and discovery brought severe punishment. That constant surveillance created a particular atmosphere. When families sat together, voices lowered almost automatically. Children, sensitive to the caution and the silences between adults, learned that some questions were dangerous and some words could not be spoken outside. Fear and internalized discipline maintained order more effectively than any posted rule. Official messaging could portray Crystalcity as a humane place that protected family reunification and provided education and work. Those who lived there understood the condition attached to that narrative. You had to accept a life under scrutiny. You had to surrender part of your freedom of thought and speech. If a family can eat at the same table under the same roof but cannot speak freely, if even a letter must be read by someone else first, what kind of reunion is that? In 1945, the war ended in Europe and then in the Pacific. Victory filled American streets. At Crystal City, the barbed wire gates finally began to open. But freedom was not as simple as walking out. For many, release came with questions, paperwork, and the uneasy sense that the world beyond the fence might not welcome them. Each person's road forward remained marked by the war's legacy. For many German and Italian families, the end of hostilities meant their enemy alien status lapsed. They could apply for release and attempt to re-enter society. Yet the label of former detainee and the suspicion that might linger outside were challenges they still had to face. For the Japanese families taken from Latin America, conditions were far harsher. Many had been brought to the United States without formal immigration papers and were therefore considered illegal under U.S. law. After the war, the U.S. government attempted to deport many of them to defeated Japan, a country most did not truly know. Some families were forced onto ships bound for a Japan in ruins. Others began long, difficult legal battles to stay in the United States or to return to their original countries in Latin America. A child who had grown up inside the camp stepped out through the gate and took his first breath of freedom. But he soon discovered that the outside world sometimes looked at him with lingering caution or curiosity. Wartime hostility had faded, yet difference and the memory of confinement remained. Time passed. The once busy Crystal City camp fell into neglect. Buildings were dismantled, barbed wire was rolled up and removed. The land seemed to want to forget what had happened there. History did not let it disappear entirely. The site of the Crystal City family internment camp was formally listed on the National Register of Historic Places with NRIS number 1400474. That designation was a national acknowledgement of its historical significance. Texas historical agencies also placed a marker there, telling the story of this complicated past. From family internment camp to historic site, the shift in language signals a shift in distance. We move from a place where policy was executed to a vantage point where history is examined. The detention system, once justified as necessary for national security, has become a continuing subject of debate and reflection for historians, the public, and the descendants of those who were confined there. Physical barbed wire can be removed in a matter of months. But how long does it take for the inner barriers created by stamping enemy onto individual families to truly dissolve? How many generations of courage and honesty does it require to fold a history filled with contradiction into a nation's shared memory? The wind still passes over this stretch of southern Texas. It is now difficult to trace the camp's outlines on the ground. But if you know what happened here and you stand in the quiet, you may hear a faint echo of the past, not only a story about war and security, but a deeper interrogation of family, identity, freedom, and how a nation under extreme pressure decides who counts as us and who is made into them. Fences can be taken down. History requires retelling, listening, and acknowledgement again and again until the frozen ice sealed inside it finally begins to loosen.